first topic in this sequence is client and server. There are three subtopics. The first one, client-side program running environment. Second, server-side program running environment. And third one, communication model between client and server. Okay. Then we need to talk about how to initiate a communication from the client side and how to process the request from the server side. Okay. So here is a client, a computer, running at the client's side, and the users use the computer to access websites. Okay. Then server side. Okay. We can, have a computer, okay, or many computers running at a server side. Okay. Yeah. So typically, the company that use servers to provide services to audience in a web usually use a lot of computers. Okay. Even there are many computers at the server side because they work as a whole system, so they can be treated as just like one computer. Okay. All right. First, let's look at the program running environment at the client side. So typically, it is a web browser. Okay, so we use web browser to access different web pages. Okay. Although there are possibly other types of program running environment, okay, like mobile devices, but most of the time, web browsers are used as the program running environment. Okay. So now let's look at what programming languages or files that can be run in a web browser. Okay. The first one, HTML. Okay. Hypertext Markup Language. Okay. So it is called a markup language, not a programming language, okay, because there is no programming logic in HTML. Okay. So typically, it uses many tags to mark the content in an HTML document. Yeah. Second one, CSS. So that is Cascade Style Sheet. Okay. This type of files are mainly used to help add styles to HTML document, okay, to make the web pages have rich styles, look better, more appealing. Yeah. So it is also very useful. We will discuss CSS work with HTML in later video lessons. Third one, JavaScript. This is a programming language. Okay. It has programming logic. Okay. We can use it to handle dynamic content in a web browser. Okay. Yeah. So it is very powerful, very useful. Yeah. So we will also discuss JavaScript later. Okay. So that's the client side. Programs or scripts or files, documents. Okay? Now server. Okay. First, let's look at the server. So what is a server? Okay. When we talk about server, so typically we have two different meanings. One is hardware server. Another is software server. Okay. Hardware, so it's a machine, computer, yeah, used as a server. Okay. Yeah. Software, yeah. So your hardware you cannot solve problem directly. Okay. You need a software. Okay. So you need to run a server software to get program running environment so that you can process data, run all different kinds of files at the server side. Okay? And here in this class, we mainly use server in this meaning, software meaning. Now let's look at our software server. Okay. Yeah. Also, there are two types of servers we will use here. Okay. The first type, web server. Okay. Yeah. Second one, database server. Okay. Yeah. For the web server, we will use two. Okay. First one, Apache. Second one, Tomcat. For database server, we use MySQL database server. Okay. All right. So now we move to the web server. Okay. For the web server, Apache, Tomcat. Okay. Yeah. All right. For Apache, the server-side scripting language we use is PHP. Okay. For Tomcat, the server-side programming language, we use Java. Okay. Yeah. Because Apache cannot run Java. Okay. Yeah. All right. Now let's compare PHP and Java. PHP, we call it server-side scripting language, not programming language. Okay? Although it's a programming language, but more precisely, scripting language. Java we call programming language. The main difference is, for the scripting language, we mean it is interpreted language, not compiled language. So for a programming language, so we implicitly we mean it is a compiled language. Okay? So compile, there is a compile step for Java. Okay? When you have a source code, if you compile it, the compiler will convert the source code to the machine code. Okay? So then the machine can execute the machine code. Okay? But for PHP, there is no compiler. Okay? But there is an interpreter. Okay? The interpreter will interpret or convert the higher level language directly to machine code and execute it. So there is no, compile step. So it convert and run immediately. So that is different. Okay? Yeah. So if later, if we have chance, we will talk about a little more about this. Okay? So now, so we finish the subtopic number 1 and number 2. Okay? Next, we will look at subtopic number 3, communication model between client and server. Now the third subtopic, communication model between client and server. First, let's look at how to initiate a communication from the client side. Okay. First, where does a communication get started? Okay. In a web browser. So the user uses a web browser to start a communication. Okay. So then, how to start it? Yeah. Through a URL. Okay. Yeah. So URL. How to through URL? So the user can type a URL, okay, in a web browser, or click a hyperlink, okay, to trigger a URL, okay. Yeah. So then, to do what? So you send the URL to the server side to do what? Okay? Sending a request. Okay? You send a request to the server. You want to get some service. The server needs to process the request and do data processing, then return the response. Okay? So sending a request. Next, what information do you put in a request? Okay. First, okay, you should have domain name. Okay, domain name, okay, in your request. For example, so let's see, we have a http://www.somedomain.com. Okay, you need to have a domain name. Okay, so because this domain name will tell the location of the server. Otherwise, nowhere to send the request. Okay, yeah. So domain name. Okay. Second, you may need path of a resource. Okay. So when you send a request to this domain, where is the resource you want to get? Okay? You request what resource? Okay? So you need to specify the location of your resource. Okay? So you may need to specify a path. Okay? So here, we just use some abstract path here. Okay? And you may need to provide file name. Okay? So you reach that location, but which file? Okay? So you may need to add a, some file name. Let's say myfile.php. Okay? Okay? So this is one of the possibility. Okay? File name. Okay? All right. So other than that, you may also need to send parameters. Okay? Because the request could have some different ways to process data. So you need to use parameters to control those different ways. Okay? So this part, so we will discuss later. Okay, parameters. Okay. And another possibility, submit forms. Submit HTML forms. Okay? So we'll talk about that later. Okay. All right. So that's what we can do at the client side when we initiate a communication. Okay. Next, let's look at the server side. Process the request. So finally, the last subtopic, process the request. So now let's assume at the server side, we receive the request. So now we need to process it. First, receiving the step, the request. After we receive the request, then we can process it. So before we process it, first we need to know what is a request. Okay? First we need to understand the request itself. What is it? Okay? So basically it is a text content with attachment. Okay? The attachment could be binary file. Okay? You can attach image, you can attach PDF, Word file, binary file. Okay? So that's the typical format of a request. Then, the structure of the request. What is the structure of it? Okay? There is certain structure. Okay? A structure based on HTTP protocol. Okay? HTTP protocol will specify the structure. How? We will talk about that later. Then, processing will start. Processing. Okay? So when we talk about processing, now we need to look at the server. Okay? So here I like to use the Apache as the example to explain processing step. Okay. For the processing, so typically there are two types of content: static content and dynamic content. Two types of content to be processed. First, let's look at how to process static content. For the static content, typically we mean HTML, CSS, images, etc. Okay? For static content, Apache can handle directly. Okay? Yeah. Handled by Apache. Directly. Okay? Handled by Apache directly. But for dynamic content, Apache cannot handle. Okay? Apache need to send it to the PHP engine. Okay? So here, let's say, our dynamic content is PHP. Okay? So Apache cannot handle directly. Okay? Yeah. So Apache need to send .php file to the PHP engine. Okay, so the PHP engine will execute and do the data processing, and after the processing, it will return the result. What kind of result? What format result? HTML format result to Apache. Okay? So then Apache will return that result to the client-side browser. Okay? So the user can see the return result. Okay? So this is the communication model. Okay? Client-side, server-side, the basic steps in the communication model. So we finish our part 1 of the web basics, client and server.